time marches on and we're in the week of October 18th to the 24th. We look at a big week of action. Not only do we have a lecture exam on Tuesday, but we're also looking at one of our most important introductory material lectures. You know, we need to think a lot about how we want to activate knowledge in this area. And so I'm going to suggest that everybody, not just the TA that is giving the lecture, but that everybody takes time to look through the material going into Lab 13. We begin our biochemical tests on that day, and we begin our survey of bacteria. So we all need to be at the table when it comes down to teaching students how to profile bacteria. What are the characteristics of the streps versus the staph? What does the family Enterobacteriaceae not have that the family Pseudomonasaceae has? We need to be able to explain these concepts to the students, so we all need to be able to come to the table on that. And speaking of which, all of you have been doing a marvelous job of coming to the table to assess skill tests, and I have been just incredibly impressed with the number of TAs that have been present in Open Lab, ready and excited to assess skill tests. And we made it through. You're done. Now we need to turn our attention to lab notebooks and giving students feedback on their lab notebooks. And in fact, it would be great if we could get the first lab notebook check into our midterm grades. And that is the other thing that is coming up this week. We are looking to try to get midterm grades up to date. So the lab notebook check will be one of the things in those midterm grades. So let's take a moment. We'll come back to the calendar in a minute, but I want to take a moment to look at midterm grades and to talk about what has happened and what has not happened. First of all, there was a little typo in the skill test saying that on the sheet that they turn in that it's out of 20, even though the points add up to 30. That's a typo. It is out of 30. So we have the 30-point skill test, and I've gone ahead and put that into a spreadsheet here so that we can bear in mind the number of points that should go into the midterm grade. So 30 from the skill test. We also know that we will have done 14 pre-labs at 2.5 points apiece. So that goes in as the pre-lab score that is possible, a little over halfway there. We've also done the unknown press release. So I'm going to write that in here, unknown press release. And that, we remember, was worth 5 points. So we'll add that in. And then, of course, we've had the dilution problems. Those are worth 10 points, so we'll add those in. And the Pipette Man tutorial, I'm just going to call that Pipette Man, and that's worth 5 points. And then finally, the Graham stain report. So Graham report, that is worth 15 points. So it looks like, should we tally up all that should be included on the midterm grade, your midterm should be out of this point total. So we'll just go ahead and sum these up of all of these. 100 points. Hey, that's pretty sweet. Looks like a nice even round midterm grade. So let's try to get those done as noted on the calendar by the end of the week, when on that very same day, Alex and Heidi are going to be responsible for Open Labs. So hopefully you're already jazzed for Open Lab time, one of the best learning times that we have. I keep thinking, how could we make all of our learning like what we do in Open Lab? I'm working on it, that's for sure. So hopefully we'll come up with some ideas for that. So a couple other little things. I wanted to just show you the excitement in the world about probiotics again, and as always, but it's so exciting to me to see that even The Guardian has a beautiful article on probiotic bacteria, particularly Bifidobacterium longum, very important probiotic bacterium that's found in certain fermented milk products like lassi. It's shown that, in fact, this bifidobacterium can help decrease anxiety, help decrease depression, and also some of the early studies on this have shown that it helps increase memory. So I know some of you looking at exam and particularly midterms should be excited to enhance your diet with a little more Bifidobacterium longum. So that being said, let's jump into the TA guidelines for Lab Lecture 13. And this is a huge one. Everybody should probably take some time to read through these TA guidelines, become even more well-versed in biochemical and physiological testing than you already are. There's always more to learn. Every time I read through this guideline, I learn something new because I think, oh gosh, I had forgotten about that. And I think I'm going to do a little more research on that. You know, maybe I had forgotten about Peptostreptococcus, and I'm like, oh yeah, bacterial vaginosis, that's right. Peptostreptococcus is definitely an anaerobic gram-positive bacterium that fits into this gram-positive cocci group. We don't talk a lot about it, but it's kind of neat to understand that there's more in this group the gram-positive cocci than what we cover in lecture. It's always great to have a little more knowledge than what your students have. I should make note that we need to make sure on this particular lab that we do a good job of having them inoculate their throat swabs first before they get out, you know, their Streptococcus pyogenes, for example. We don't want anyone giving anyone else strep throat. So have them do their throat swabs first, but also teach them that half-ass streaking, right? Meaning that they use half the plate. They do a T-streak, but they use half the plate to do so. We need to make sure to encourage them that their entire unknown ID process will hinge upon their understanding of the biochemical tests and of the profiles of the bacteria. It's just like if you were in fact a criminal profiler and you were trying to catch a perpetrator, if you knew nothing about the characteristics of that criminal, you would have no idea how to in fact profile and find that person. So this is the same exact thing. If we don't learn a lot about the bacteria and know what their profiles are, it makes it very difficult to identify them. So help students to get to the point that they can use this material to actually apply it, to actually make a good unknown ID plan for their unknown identifications. Very important concepts that are on here and very important introductory material into the different groups of bacteria. Streptococci, staphylococci, enterococci, micrococci, and then we'll look at the gram-negatives, differentiating Enterobacteriaceae, all of our Salmonella, Shigella, Klebsiella, Serratia from our Pseudomonadeaceae, right, our Pseudomonas species that are oxidase positive. Now that is one very important note. When we get into lab 14 on Thursday, we will be doing the oxidase test. Lucky for you, I have already shown the students the video for the oxidase test in lecture. I literally played it in lecture. So I would suggest that you go through the video on Virtual Edge and see that video for yourself so you know what the students have already seen. They should know how to do this test. I still suggest designating a TA to be near that station, but the students should know how to do this. So just reminding them and reactivating their knowledge, maybe asking them, you know, how do you perform an oxidase test? You know, why is it important that you have positive and negative controls when performing this test? We also need on lab 14 to have them predict the results of their KIA test, and this might be one way to make your lecture active. And by the way, some of you have been doing a rad job of that, and I've been gradually getting video of all of you lecturing. Some of you have been doing a fantastic job of coming in prepared with some sort of active learning process, maybe having the students predict the test of the KIA or the results of the KIA test during lecture would be a good way to sort of break up the monotony of a sort of typical lecture environment where everybody's falling asleep. We don't want that. Okay, cool. So on lab 14, a little more on biochemical testing and looking at some additional tests. We'll be talking about the Taxose test. I like to write this on the board during that time so that students get really familiar with the Taxose A being bacitracin, Taxose P being opticin, and the differentiation between beta hemolytic strains with the Taxose A versus alpha hemolytic strains such as pneumoniae with the Taxose P. Beautiful. I think we're pretty good on knowing what's coming up in the two lectures, but I did have one last very important thing to say. One thing that is on your kind of requirements for being a TA is to arrive 15 minutes before your section. Some of you do a marvelous job of that, and many of you also do a marvelous job of checking to make sure that everything is ready for your lab that's going to be taking place. However, this semester we've been getting very spoiled. Holly has been doing a big majority of the work for us, and we'd really like to start to help her out with that. So I've talked with John, and John is Holly's supervisor, and so it's important to him that Holly is not being overworked. So we need to make sure that we're doing our fair share. So from here on out, our jobs are going to be the following. We need to go pick up the bins from down the hall. We also need to make sure that the cultures are set out and the media is set out, and that's something we need to do before 8 a.m. in the morning. So we need to make sure that we're there with bells on by 7:45 and that we've gotten all of those tasks taken care of. Marvelous. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of is that on Friday we will be inoculating unknowns. So once again, if all of you could show out in force, and we even had some prior TAs that came last week to help inoculate unknowns, that would be super, super radtastic. All right, hope you had a wonderful weekend, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on Tuesday.